Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into one of the most incredible cinematic rise and fall stories in all of human history. We're going to explore the epic journey of the Nabataeans and their legendary capital city, Petra. Now, if you think of the ultimate American-style frontier boomtown, a place built on pure grit, wildly savvy entrepreneurship, and massive wealth before eventually going bust and fading right back into the landscape, well, the Nabataeans basically invented that exact playbook thousands of years ago. Picture this for a second. Imagine you're wandering through a totally barren, sun-scorched desert, and out of nowhere you stumble upon a perfectly preserved massive stone city hidden deep inside a canyon. I mean, it sounds like pure Hollywood, right? But this was incredibly real. The big question we're unpacking today is, how in the world did a humble nomadic tribe of tent dwellers manage to tame one of the harshest environments on Earth and then construct a sophisticated metropolis entirely out of solid rock? We'll take the eccentric Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt. Back in 1812, he actually disguised himself as an Arab scholar just so he could penetrate the deep desert and rediscover this totally lost city. For centuries, Petra had literally been nothing more than a rumor to the Western world. When Burckhardt finally slipped through this narrow, gloomy chasm and saw an enormous, beautifully carved temple just looming out of the rock face, he was utterly breathless. He knew right then and there that he had found a true masterpiece of ancient art. Section 1. The Lost Rock City, a desert mystery. To really understand how this impossible city came to be, we have to start with its foundation. For those of us watching from the States, if you want to picture the landscape of Petra, just think of the deeply familiar, rugged terrains of the American Southwest. We're talking places like Zion National Park or the Grand Canyon in Arizona and Utah. Petra is carved directly into what's known as Ishrin sandstone. This rock was formed around 500 million years ago, and it is famous for these incredibly rich, swirling colors, vibrant oranges, deep purples, and rosy reds. It's a breathtaking canvas for sure, but more importantly for our story, it's highly porous.
Section 2. Masters of the Desert, Engineering the Sands.
Let's talk about the people who actually conquered this environment. The Nabataeans survived through absolute frontier ingenuity, which resulted in a frankly mind-blowing feat of civil engineering. Now, the region did have a miraculous natural freshwater source called Musa Spring, but to support a booming metropolis, they had to capture literally every single drop of seasonal rain. They pulled this off in 3 brilliant steps. First, because that sandstone was porous and leaked, they lined natural rock pools with hard stucco plaster to create waterproof reservoirs. Second, they built miles of subterranean terracotta plumbing to pipe that water directly into the city's center. And third, they actually contoured massive tracts of land into shallow funnels to direct scarce rainwater to a single point, sometimes just to grow one single fruit tree. Thanks to this absolute mastery of water, Petra became a lush oasis supporting up to 20,000 permanent residents.
Section 3. The ultimate ancient monopoly. Controlling trade.
So with their base of operations secured, the Nabataeans didn't just survive. They got spectacularly rich. The whole foundation of their empire was built on 2 incredibly lucrative commodities, frankincense and myrrh. Think of these as the must-have products of an ancient tech boom. They're tree resins harvested from gnarled desert trees. And why were they so valuable? Well, ancient cities smelled absolutely horrific. There was basically no sanitation. These resins contained volatile antibacterial compounds that covered putrid smells, fought disease, and were burned to create clean, sacred spaces in temples everywhere from Rome to Egypt. Kings and priests literally couldn't get enough of the stuff.
And their power really comes down to one staggering number, 25%. Because Petra was nestled safely inside an impenetrable canyon, the Nabataeans completely controlled the desolate trade routes leading in and out. They essentially acted as the ultimate middleman, offering protection and logistics for all these global caravans. And in exchange, they slapped a massive 25% tax on all goods passing through their territory.
And it wasn't just incense either. Petra sat dead center in a vast spider's web of global commerce. They were taxing spices pouring in from India, fine silks coming all the way from China, ivory from Eastern Africa, and bitumen, which is a tar-like substance from the Dead Sea that the Egyptians used for embalming mummies. They held an absolute, total monopoly over global commerce, and they accumulated absurd levels of wealth because of it.
But here's what's so fascinating. Despite all this insane wealth, their culture remained surprisingly grounded. The Greek historian Strabo actually visited them and noted how wildly different they were from the Romans. It was a true egalitarian frontier. They had this real pull-yourself-up-by-your-bootstraps culture,
with very few slaves. In fact, Strabo was totally shocked to report that the Nabataean king was so democratic, he would actually serve his own guests at banquets. It's a rugged, independent mindset that honestly deeply resonates with our own democratic ideals today.
Section 4. Define the empires. Guerrilla tactics. Of course, when you hold a monopoly this lucrative, massive corporate empires are eventually going to attempt a hostile takeover. Around 312 BC, a very powerful Greek king named Antigonus decided he wanted Petra's wealth. He sent an elite force of 4,000 heavily armed foot soldiers to raid the city while the Nabataean men were away. They looted 14 tons of silver and kidnapped the women and children, but the Greeks were slow, exhausted, and weighed down by all that armor and loot. When the Nabataeans found out, they rallied 8,000 light camel riders. They were incredibly fast and knew the desert like the back of their hand. They caught that massive Greek army in the dead of night and completely slaughtered them. It was an absolute masterclass in asymmetrical guerrilla warfare.
And the Greeks couldn't simply strike back, because the Nabataeans had the ultimate home field advantage. They had secret subterranean water reservoirs hidden all throughout the desert, marked only by subtle signs that their own people knew. So if a massive invading army tried to chase them, the Nabataeans would just vanish into the dunes, and the invaders would literally die of thirst trying to find them. Environmental knowledge beat brute force every single time.
When the Greeks tried to lay siege a second time, this time under General Demetrius, they found Petra fully fortified and ready. A Nabataean actually called down from the rocks with this impassioned plea of rugged independence, declaring that they chose this harsh desert life specifically because they were in no way willing to be slaves. They basically told the Greeks, "You cannot survive here and you will not conquer us." Frustrated and completely out of water, the Greek general had to accept a cash payoff and humbly march his army back home in defeat.
Section 5. The Fall of Petra. An Empire Crumbles. But as we know, no boom lasts forever. A shifting global industry can ruin even the strongest monopoly. First, in 106 AD, the Roman Empire finally grew too large and annexed Nabatea, though it was largely peaceful. But then the world really started changing. In the 3rd and 4th centuries, the Roman Empire adopted Christianity. Early Christians didn't really use incense in their worship, so the bottom just completely fell out of the frankincense market. Around the exact same time, the Romans figured out it was way cheaper to ship goods by sea through Egypt rather than paying overland tolls. Petra was suddenly bypassed. And then came the final nail in the coffin, the absolutely devastating Galilee earthquake of 363 AD.
The aftermath of that quake was just tragic. It hit in the middle of the night, reducing half the city to rubble. But more importantly, it shattered their lifeblood. Those subterranean pipes cracked wide open, leaking all that precious water straight into the sand. The dams collapsed, causing massive flash floods that wiped out homes. With the trade routes already bypassing the city, there was simply no money left to rebuild that complex infrastructure. Their fragile grip on the desert was officially broken, and those magnificent stone carvings were slowly abandoned to the howling desert winds.
Which brings us to a final, pretty profound thought to take away from this explainer today. Think about modern American industry towns. You know, the Rust Belt cities that boomed with steel and manufacturing, only to fall into ruin when industries shifted and global trade routes changed. Petra was the ultimate ancient corporate monopoly, carved directly into unyielding stone, looking completely permanent. Yet when the world's economy shifted, it vanished into the sand. So if a civilization built on solid rock can just be reclaimed by the desert, how permanent are our own modern empires? Definitely something to think about. Thanks so much for learning with me today, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.